The Mind Deconstructed, Mental Health and Wellness with Dr. Kaz and George.
I'm Dr. Kaz Nelson, an American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology certified psychiatrist licensed to practice medicine in the state of Minnesota.
I'm your podcast host, George. I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Minnesota, but I'm not here to give you legal advice.
The statements of Dr. Kaz and George are not a substitute for medical care, and our opinions are our own. If you are experiencing a mental health emergency, please seek assistance from a professional.
You can contact us on Twitter at MindDeconstruct. On today's episode, a closer look at Impostor Syndrome. Welcome back to the Mind Deconstructed podcast with Dr. Kaz, and I am George. Now, Dr. Kaz, I don't know if everyone started from episode 1, so not everyone listening may know that I am your brother.
Yes.
So it's not just a random lawyer talking to Dr. Kaz every day. We actually, hang out quite a bit, and this is one of the things that we enjoy doing in our spare time.
We've known each other your whole life and pretty much my whole life. I am the big sister, but yes, we are fellow Minnesotans and fellow family members, and that's why it makes it fun to talk to you, George.
And probably only about 20 to 50% of our podcast audience is also family members. So.
Shout out to the family.
But this is what we like doing, and we're glad that we can help people out or keep people informed or just maybe kill a couple minutes of your drive time.
We haven't gotten into a sister-brotherly fight yet on the podcast.
No, we'd probably cut it out if we did too.
That's true. Not one that made the final cut.
Hot topics in mental health. Dr. Kaz, you have been very active in the media world recently. I did hear one of your segments on NPR recently. You were filling in for John Hallberg. I actually had a few coworkers mention that they're aware of our podcast and they had heard you on NPR and were really excited to hear you. I also understand you've been on a competing podcast. Should we call it a competing podcast?
There's room in this world for many podcasts. Yeah, I was delighted to be invited on the Post Call podcast hosted by Nick Andrews, and this was the June 26th, 2019 episode. And he asked me all about my career and my philosophy and some of the projects I've been working on. So if you have a little bit of an interest in what's going on in my world in terms of academic psychiatry, go ahead and check out that episode if you're interested.
And we'll put a link to that podcast and that episode on our website, theminddeconstructed.org, if anyone wants to check that out and hear Dr. Kaz some more on a different podcast.
Yeah.
Let's talk again about Dr. Kaz at the Minnesota State Fair.
Yep, I'll be there Monday, August 26th. There's an all-day Mental Health Awareness Day celebration in Dan Patch Park. There's a stage there. There's going to be booths. The National Alliance on Mental Illness Minnesota is co-sponsoring this with several other organizations. And I'm delighted to be the MC there on the stage from 10:45 to 1:45. There's going to be some awesome acts and performers. I was, on the verge of tears. I was so inspired by some of the acts when we did this last year, so I'm delighted to be back. I hope to see you there.
Last year, the 10:45 to 1:45, that seemed like a prime slot because we had the earlier shift, and then I can't think of his name, but it was an NPR personality had the second shift.
Yes, John Moe was
John
there.
Moe was,
yes.
was right there right after us.
I got to hand him the microphone. That was a thrill.
And they had way more swag than we did. They had all sorts of NPR stuff there.
Yeah, we're going to have to up our swag game, George.
Dr. Kaz, I am not familiar with imposter syndrome, and we're going to spend a whole episode talking about it, so maybe we should start off with telling me and the world what is imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I picked this as a topic because as I've been traveling in different circles, certainly in my professional career, but also in other more casual conversations, I've just been noticing more and more people describing to me this phenomena, which could be considered something called imposter syndrome, where people say, I'm scared that I'm not qualified to do what I'm doing. I'm worried about taking the next step, worried that people think I'm more competent than I actually am, and that maybe I am an imposter in my own life.
That sounds very interesting. Is it a thing, or is it something that you think is a thing.
Like, are people really imposters or are they not?
No, like is this an actual diagnosis, or is this something that you personally are interested in
Oh,
and think is
yes.
out there?
Good to clarify. There are different actual psychiatric disorders that are certain delusions where you think people that you know are actually imposters, like implanted by a devil or a demon or the CIA or something
Like
like
that.
that.
Is there a Truman disorder where you think your whole life is a TV show,
Yes.
and like everyone in it is an actor?
Yes. So this is not what we're talking about today. So really good to clarify. No, yeah, this topic of imposter syndrome is more general, more of a universal or commonly felt feeling. And because it does have mental health implications just in terms of wellness and stress, I thought it'd be really good to talk about it today in the podcast. But yes, I'm not talking about necessarily a pathological disorder or illness today. We're talking more about a feeling that sometimes people have as they go about their life, either in their personal or professional setting, that they're kind of going through the actions and seem to be doing okay, but in their heart, they feel like they're really, truly not good enough or deserving of what they're doing or not deserving to take that next step.
I'm glad you mentioned more of a generalized or universal thing, because I wouldn't think that it would be too out of the realm of possibility to say that most people out there have moments when they're like, well, me as an attorney, like I know that I'm actually a competent attorney, but sometimes when I'm doing something, I take a step back and think, wait a minute, I'm in court arguing in front of a jury. Like, how did I get here? How am I qualified to do this? Like, is this really me doing this?
Did I get in by mistake? Yeah, those kinds of questions people have. And to be honest, I think that this is more of a phenomena that people who maybe don't have role models that look like them or behave like them in their area or in their field are more likely to feel this feeling. So you're somebody who has had the advantage of being in, professionally a majority gender, Caucasian, heterosexual, all those kinds of things. You may be less at risk for true imposter syndrome than if you had a colleague who did not have all those attributes, who was in that same role.
So does that mean it's more? Is it more of a thing where you feel like you don't belong, or more that you just feel like, how is this me, or how am I really supposed to be here?
It's kind of a combination of both of those things. Okay. Yeah. So when you are pervasively getting little signals or little flags that you don't belong, it can sometimes lead to this conclusion of maybe I got in by mistake, or I'm not really competent to do this, because you don't see it really demonstrated necessarily in those in a position of authority or power.
So this is something where like other people's implicit biases or reactions may play into your personal feelings about how you belong or don't belong.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So, for example, if you're in a workplace or a setting where everyone plays golf because they grew up playing golf, and then you go out and all play golf together, but you haven't played golf and you don't even own golf clubs and you don't know the rules of golf, you might logically say, oh, well, that's okay. That's fine. They know how to do this and I don't. But when that happens over and over again in different ways, you start to feel like maybe I don't belong here, or was let in by mistake, or I'm not competent to do this.
Why are we talking about it? What can someone gain from knowing that they're not alone, or that this is out there?
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of people who feel this way and thought that perhaps they were the only person who felt this way, or perhaps that they believe that perhaps if they felt that way meant that they actually weren't qualified to do what they were doing. Or why that concerns me is because we need to have people with diverse backgrounds in different roles in society, professionally, and in our community. And so if there is stress related to this imposter syndrome feeling, that can actually degrade performance and degrade people's growth in these different areas. So if we can recognize this as a risk factor, acknowledge that it causes stress, and take steps proactively to sort of work against that, I think that can be of benefit to different people.
How would a person go about working against it, or validating their role in their career or place in society.
Sure. Well, I can kind of give you a personal example. I'm a leader at the University of Minnesota. I've kind of worked my way up through the ranks. I chair different committees. And at the point where I was exploring chairing different committees, at the time I did have the thought, I don't know if I have the right to chair this committee. I've been on the committee 5 years. I've been an active participant, but what right do I have to chair this committee when the previous chairs haven't looked like me or had the same demographics? And so if I had sort of been susceptible to that and said, oh no, I guess I won't chair this committee because I don't look or act like those people, then I would have missed out on that important opportunity. But knowing that that's something that can happen to people, I was able to talk with mentors and say, do I really have what it takes to chair this committee? And people said, yes, absolutely. You might do it differently than someone else, but that's okay. You don't have to do something exactly the same to have it be a high quality contribution. You can do it your way. And I'm really glad that I got that mentorship because I've been able to contribute to leadership and I think advance the mission and make meaningful changes. But if I had let that imposter syndrome get in the way, I would have missed that opportunity. And I think that happens all the time.
Is this something that women are more susceptible to than men, just based on historical power dynamics? And I know I hear the statistic or study, and I'm not going to quote it exactly, but how men will apply for a job if they have like 6 out of 10 of the qualifications, and women will wait until they have all 10 of the qualifications before they'd apply to that same job.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely gender dynamics. Minority and other marginalized communities are definitely impacted by this at higher rates because when there is that historical power imbalance or power differential, and that's happened societally or culturally, that leaves the people who have been left out of that power structure to really wonder if they belong and if they are truly qualified. And oftentimes the answer is yes, even when they think that might not be the case. And the other place imposter syndrome has been showing up has been in this personal versus public persona question that's been evolving on social media and in the digital worlds.
Is that a debate where are you allowed to have, act differently in private spaces than you do in public spaces?
Yeah, sort of like that. But also, if you go online, if you go on Facebook and Twitter and see lives of people that look very high functioning and perfect and the best aspects of people's highlight reel, so to speak, and then you put your own highlight reel on there, but there's a little bit of a difference between what's online and what you're really experiencing. And so sometimes that can kind of lead you to feel like an imposter in your own life because you're sort of putting an image out there that feels a little bit dishonest to reality.
And I've even seen celebrities or other people where they're like, okay, I need to take a social media break because it's not good for my mental health to see, everyone's perfection and then know that I'm not perfect, even though I'm presenting this public face on social media and other people are feeding off of that. So it's...
Exactly. So it's this broad concept that what you see and what you assume about other people's capabilities or their experience is sometimes different than your own internal or private experience. And if there appears to be a large gap in those experiences, it can lead to this kind of distress and a sense of, being an imposter in your own life. And I just think, regardless of your background or race or ethnicity or sexual orientation or gender or any of those kinds of things, there are all pockets of life where you might experience that. And I just wanted to raise that as something that is probably more common than you would expect. And it's okay to feel that way. And there's actually steps and things you can do to challenge it if that's appropriate.
You mentioned getting a mentor. Is this something where therapy or self-affirmations or what is it? What else is there?
Yeah, psychotherapy could absolutely help with this.
I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. Doggone it, people like me.
Exactly.
I mean,
yes.
not to make light of.
No. I mean, I think that's a form of mindfulness or a form of self-talk to sort of challenge some of the fear that people can have over being a sense of an imposter. The other thing is sometimes there might be something that you're not qualified to do and shouldn't do, and so
That's the scary part, because where's the line?
exactly. So it does take a form of external reality check, and so I think that's why not sitting with this quietly or privately or struggling with it alone, but talking about it with different people in your field or people you trust to say, here's what I'm thinking. Does that sound reasonable? What are the standards here? Do you know if there's any criteria, or, should I go for it? What do you think? And I think doing some of that sort of self-calibration with people you trust, and then being open if people say, yeah, absolutely, go for it. That could be a reasonable step for you, or, yeah, it makes sense that with this type of preparation, you would be prepared to do that. That can really be helpful. The other thing, maybe you're somebody who doesn't struggle with imposter syndrome. You are moving about the world in a way where you feel safe and secure and competent and admired in your field, perhaps, doing good work. And it's good to know that those around you might be feeling this way. And so you can do your part in building what we would call inclusive environments and ensuring that there is representation for people. There are signals that affirm different aspects of people's backgrounds, might create spaces and environments that actually reduce the risk of people developing imposter syndrome. So even if you're somebody who doesn't have this themselves, you have a role in really helping mitigate that for other people. And that can help bring out the best in people.
Well, that sounds easy.
None of this is simple. But we owe it to one another to do this work well, so that we're not leaving people who could really contribute and transform our society out in the cold.
Thanks for bringing this up, Dr. Kaz. I was a little scared that imposter syndrome was going to be where you all of a sudden think you are someone else, and then you're like all of a sudden you're flipping burgers and you have a wife and kids, and you thought you were a superhero or a secret agent, and you're like, how did I end up flipping burgers? Like, where's my secret agent life?
That would be a topic for another day.
That's also a Bob's Burgers episode.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for joining us today. This podcast was produced by Kaz and George. Music by Paul.
He's the best.
Contact us and send us your questions on Twitter @MindDeconstruct.